Alright, so now that we have the materials for our logo, let's see if we can make the quality of the materials look a little bit better even before we add lights. Now, one of the first things that you may notice is that we have some odd shading artifacts, and this is an advanced topic. It's referred to as normals and has to do with UV mapping and our polygon geometry, but right now what we know is it doesn't look too good. So let's see if we can clean this up. It's actually very easy to fix. What we do is we select our geometry and we just use a simple tool that fixes normals automatically. So we don't have to get into the advanced topic right now of explaining what normals would be. That would be a good discussion for a later time. Now this tool is found in our polygon menu set. So we're going to take a look at a very neat feature that Maya has, menu sets. Now in our status line, on the very left hand side you can see this drop down. Here we have different sets of menus, and as I change these menus, look at the main menu on the top. So as I adjust these, you can see that my menus on the back end actually change. So Maya has so many tools that we don't just have one main menu, but we actually have sets. We have a menu for animation, a menu for modeling, a menu for NURBS, dynamics, rendering. So you can see that there's a lot of tools within Maya. So we're trying to affect the polygon or our model and clean that up. So I'm going to navigate to my polygons menu set. So now that I've adjusted that menu set, now I have my polygon modeling tools. And the tool we're going to take a look at is our normals tool. Now for this to apply to our geometry, I just want to click and drag and make sure that all of my geometry is selected in my viewport. And we'll go up to our normals menu, and we're going to use the set normal angle tool. Now what this does is it'll clean up any artifacts that we have on our logo like that. Now at default the angle is 30. And 30 would probably work. You can see that it does clean up the artifact that we had there. If I undo, you can see that artifact, and when I apply, you can see how it cleans that up. But I would recommend using the angle of 15. I found that to be kind of the sweet number, the sweet spot, so to speak, to clean up a lot of artifacts automatically without having to do any manual cleanup. So adjust that angle to 15, apply that to your logo, and then close the Set Normal Angle dialog box. So there we've cleaned up all of those artifacts on the logo. So like I said, normals are an advanced topic, but the nice thing is we have a pretty easy one-click tool that cleans up all those issues that we had with our logo. And right away, if we return back to our bookmark, and I open up my render view and render, we'll be able to get a comparison and see how that just cleaned up the edges in my render. So using that normal tool improved the professionalism and gave me some nice crisp edges to my logo. So let's keep that image. So at this time, be sure to clean up the normals on your logo by switching over to your polygon menu set, using the normals tool, and setting the normal angle to 15 degrees. Remember to select all of your geometry when you apply that, and then take a look at the edges of your geometry and see how it cleaned up the artifacts for you. And then create a test render, because it's always rewarding to see how the quality of your render is improving. Alright, at this point we're going to move in and get a little bit more advanced with our materials now. So as opposed to just a boring plain color, let's see if we can give this color a bit of variation. And we can do this very simply by going to the material attributes. So I'll start with my 3D, since we have a bit more font here with the logo, just to demonstrate how this works. So I'll select my logo, right click, come down to the material attributes using the pop-up menu. And in the color, as opposed to just picking from the color wheel or using the color slider, here let's use the Swatch Tool. Now this is such a powerful tool within Maya, because here we can actually drive this attribute by using a file node or a different type of texture node. So here we could even plug in images, for example. So this is where Maya gets very complex and you have a lot of control and mastery to create rusty metals and different types of textures like that. So we're going to explore the ramp tool today. So select the ramp texture tool, and by default maybe your logo will turn gray and you're wondering what just happened. Well, now that we're using a texture, we need to kind of ramp up our graphics card, so to speak. So to do that, if you navigate to the panel toolbar, come over to this checkered icon, and this will allow us to see textures on our geometry. So when it's off, we won't be able to see textures. That'll be lighter on our graphics card, and when we turn that on, we will be able to see textures in our viewport. So here we can see our textures, and now I can use this ramp to control how this ramp is being applied to the geometry. So now, as opposed to just a solid orange color, I'm going to apply this color orange, and I'll kind of change the variation a bit. So I'll select my color swatch, and I'll use that same orange from my color history that I had before. I'll come over to this black color on my ramp chart and select that little wheel, come down to the color swatch, and I'll use that same orange. But now, just to give some variation, I'll take the value and I'll darken this up a bit. And I like to do this with all my colors. I never like to use a solid color because this will give a more professional look. The color will fade, so we'll have a variation of orange, and this will give a much more complex and a much more professional final polish rather to our material attribute. Now, do feel free to explore. You can change the type to a U ramp, which is horizontal. You can do diagonal, circular. So again, you have a lot of options to change how the ramp is applied to your geometry. I'm just going to stick with a V ramp, which is vertical, top to bottom. And you can even add additional colors in your color wheel by just clicking, or you can delete those by hitting the X. So again, feel free to explore and have a lot of fun with designing your own ramp texture. Now, just for a moment, I'm going to take this color and I'm going to turn this to black so we get a strong contrast, because I'd like to demonstrate something. Here you can see that the ramp is working on the front face, but if I look at the middle face, see how it's going from back to front? It's not going from bottom to top. Well, why is that? Well, this introduces a new topic that you'll become familiar with as you learn more about 3D, and that's the topic of UVs. Now, if you've never heard the term UV before, what this is referring to is texture coordinate space. Now that sounds technical, but to break it down, we're just talking about how a texture, such as a ramp, is applied to a 3D object. So here's how we could illustrate this. Let's say that our ramp texture is like wallpaper, and our 3D object is like an object, a wall that we're going to paint. Now, by default, we had selected just a color. So in the attribute editor, if I go to my material attributes, we had red paint. We painted our logo red. And if we painted a wall red, it doesn't matter if we paint side to side, up or down, the paint's going to get applied to the wall. And that's fine. Now, if we go to use a wallpaper, all of a sudden, it matters how we put the wallpaper. If we go side to side or up and down, the pattern of our wallpaper may change. So it's important to lay out how we're going to put the wallpaper or our texture on the object so that it lays out properly. So that process is referred to as UVs in a 3D environment. So in our case, UVs are not properly laid out. So we want to adjust these. So we're going to take a very simple introductory look at adjusting UVs to our logo. We're going to change it to just a front so we can get a nice top to bottom layout with our UV coordinates. So again, make sure we're in our polygon menu set, select the 3D object, we're going to go to create UVs, and in this case we're going to apply planar mapping. So we'll go to the options settings for our planar mapping. And for the planar mapping, we want to project from the front axis. If I look at my tool gizmo, or if I turn on my move tool, you'll see that the Z axis, or the blue axis, is the one that faces the front. So we're going to project from the front. I'll hit project, and you'll see how it gives me this gizmo now, and this is changing how my UVs are applied to the object. So if I wanted to tile, you can see my ramp is repeated several times. We're going to keep it at the default. I'm not going to touch this gizmo at all. What I'll do is, as soon as I apply it, I'm going to right click on the object and just go to object mode. All that does is completes the operation, and then I'll click away from the object to finish that. So see how this applied proper UVs. Now you can see that my wallpaper texture, my ramp texture, is going from top to bottom. We go from a darker color up to a lighter, and it's not going from back to front anymore. So we properly mapped our 3D geometry. So again, that can be a complex topic, but again, just think of it, the illustration of applying wallpaper to your object, and that'll give you a good introduction of what UVs are all about. Okay, so I'll go back to my assigned material. I had darkened the bottom color just to illustrate that point. I'm going to return that back to the lighter orange color that we had before. Now, since that's a complex procedure, we're going to repeat that a little bit quicker now with these two other operations, just to rinse and repeat that process. So I'm going to go to my material attributes. We'll come over to the color. In my swatch color, I'll select the swatch. We'll apply a ramp node, and then we'll assign the ramp color. Now again, you can see that we have bad UVs. My ramp is not being applied properly, so I'll select the object, create UVs, and the settings are already correct, so I don't even need to open the settings box. We could just go create planar mapping. And there you can see that now we have proper UVs. So to complete the operation, remember the steps. Right click, go to object mode, and select away from the object. So we'll edit the material attributes once more. I'll come back to this black color, and I'll just lighten that up to more of a gray on the bottom of my object. Okay, rinse and repeat one more time to just really reinforce how that procedure works. We'll right click, go to the material attributes. In the color swatch, we'll apply a ramp texture. See if you can think of the steps before I do these. This time I'll adjust the color first, so we'll apply the red history that we'd created. And in the darker color, I'll take that same red and then darken the value. Alright, so we get that nice red. Now, can you remember how we apply the UVs? Alright, select the object, create UVs, planar mapping. So that maps it properly. Then we right click to go to object mode and click away to complete the operation. I'm going to come back in and edit the ramp now that I see the proper UVs. It looks like I need to move the darker color up just a little bit to actually see what's going on there. All right. Very good. So I'll use something along those lines. So there we have our materials. We actually created UVs to map our materials. So let's go back to our bookmark camera just to finish things off and take a render to see how this changed the overall look and feel. So I'll create a render, and now if I render this and look at the previous renders I had, look how our logo is coming along. So now we have some interest, we have a little bit more color dynamics taking place with our logo, and we're ready to introduce lighting to our logo. So that completes our second stage of applying shaders and materials. So we learned a lot in this section. Let's quickly recap what we learned so far. So we first learned how to add color to our logos by right-clicking, assigning a new material. Once we had a material applied to the object, we then took a look at the shader properties, such as adjusting the color. We even took a look at how we were able to apply a ramp shader to the object. And that got us into a little bit more advanced topic of how we're able to apply UVs and control how our texture sits on our 3D object. Just to reinforce those steps, we applied it to the eye, the heart symbol, and the 3D, and took a look at how we're able to use that repetition to reinforce that. And also don't forget that we applied normals. So we selected objects and we applied normals to clean up any artifacts that took place on our geometry. Now, while we applied those operations, we learned about menu sets. So that sets us up nicely now for stage 3 of camera and lighting. So just to finish off the stage, be sure to save your work in progress. Remember that we created a save scene of the O2 iteration, so be sure to save that once again before we move